Hi guys, this is where my rear struts ought to go on a 1980s Ford EXP, uh, Ford Escort, the Mercury Lynx and the Mercury LN7. This is where the rear shock ought to go. And this is what it looks like. It's just this. And I do have all the hardware on the end here and on order. I'll take that apart in a minute for you, so you make sure you're not getting anything on Ron. But pretty much these things just go up inside here, and they mount onto this the spindle, knuckle, whatever you want to call it, right here, via two bolts. And then the top end stick up through this hole in the rear strut tower. So that's what it looks like untouched over there. Now, all the EXPs, they all have it's about a 4-inch by 6-inch access panel on the plastic interior panels. If you're inside your EXP right now, you'd see like I said, you'd see a 4-inch down and about 6 inch across access panel right about there, and it just pops off with a screwdriver. Just be delicate, because it's real easy to scratch and gouge the plastic around it and the plastic cap you're pulling out. Once that access cap is gone, you now see that. You'll see the top of your strut, your shock through the little window that remains. Now that window isn't too great. Yes, you can see a lot of it, but there's not much room to fit a wrench, and when you do fit a wrench in there, you obviously can't turn it very far. The Escorts, I believe the Escorts have a similar access panel there. They should. And then some of the Escorts will actually have a foam cup that sits over that guy, just to make it silent, because then it doesn't rattle against the plastic panel, the plastic interior panel that lays up against it. The EXPs, they all have like wool matting on the backside of the panel, keeps it quiet. But on my 88 wagon, it has a pair of foam cups, one that goes over each of these strut tops. So we'll step back over here. Again, that's the hole and what it looks like once you've removed everything. So on your stock car, that will have the original paint under it, or it should. So this one is black. That was the original color of this car. We'll go down here underneath and show you what all is involved in the bottom side here. Now, I had removed the brakes, but just for a totally another reason. The side effects is it helps me show you what's going on here. So you can see obviously our rear shock has these two bolt holes. Here we go. Now you can see the top one and the bottom one, and then our spindle also has two bolt holes. See one on the top there, and then one on the bottom there. So they're kind of hard to see when your brakes are on and everything's rusty. This is what it looks like when you have your shock mounted, but the bolts removed. Now, what are the bolts? What do they look like? Well, there are these two bolts here. You'll know what they are. They're shouldered, or stepped, I should say, just on this top half of an inch on each of them. And then what they go into is this little nut retainer deal. So this guy sits on most of my, or maybe on this one, yeah, this sat in the back. Its orientation doesn't really matter. They all have this spring thing that's just to keep tension on the unit, which helps these nuts from spinning. I don't know if any have a hole for that tab to go into, but it's not too important. It can go on, upside down, right side out, whatever way you found it, whatever way you want. You can't screw it up. And then so once this is set up from the back side, you just put your bolts in. They are going pretty easy. Once you line them up. And once your two bolts are in, you don't need a wrench to hold these guys unless your plate is compromised. If this plate is compromised, these two nuts will free spin. Now, so when you're disassembling these, you probably need some heat. I don't always have to have heat to get these guys off, but it sure as heck helps. Yeah, and that's all there is to remove this bottom one here. Now on the sorry, on the newer cars, some of them do have a brake line that mounts somewhere on these guys, and then the GTs and EXPs from 86 on up will have this here on the shock. This is for the rear sway bar, the anti-roll bar. It comes apart pretty easy. As you can see, it's just a pinch clamp. So you just remove the one nut and bolt, and then you have to pry this sucker open, or take it out with your shock there, and just undo that bottom nut here to separate it from your bar. But this is something to keep in mind. If you have an EXP or GT from 86 to 90, you will have one of these deals to work with. And then, like I said, some of these do have a little hook or pedestal for the brake line. These earlier ones for sure do not. Now for the top. The top, it just goes through that cavity like so. Getting the nut off the top can be kind of tricky because it's usually a crushed nut or a nylon lock nut. This is a crushed nut. What does that mean? If you're not familiar with it, the lock nut, the nylon one has a round circle of nylon in the top here, and as you put it on the nylon, it grips real hard to the threads, keeps it from backing out naturally. So if you get it kind of warm with a torch, it will come out easier. But this one, this is the crushed nut. You can see how that spot's shiny? Look again here in this other corner. That's how these are. I can show you a little bit better on this guy what to look for a crushed nut. You can see it's elliptical. It is not a circle. It's been crushed in these two locations that I'm pinching, and it's very evident because it's not a circle. While on the back side it is. You can see it's still crushed where my fingers are on this tapered end. So they crush that from the factory. It helps this lock. It creates an interference with the threads. So this can be a real pain to get off, especially if it's been rusted onto your shock and if this guy's getting worn out. And I don't mean, maybe worn out is the wrong word. I mean, if this has been pulling threads off of other shocks, this will be a pain to get out. Again, you can try heat. Sometimes it works. It don't hurt. Just don't light a fire to your car, because like I said, the plastic panel inside the interior often has wool behind it, and that crap is very flammable. But once your nut is off, you can take this off. This is the top steel cup. It sits downward that you saw inside there. And then going to be, well, almost vulcanized to this will be the first rubber hub. You see this one has a Ford stamp on it, and there's indentations on the bell here from where this has been sitting. So it sits just like this. These two parts belong together. Set those to the side, set your nut inside it, and then now here's what you start seeing underneath the car. Underneath the car, you'll see this first bushing. When you remove the strut, this usually sticks up in there. You know, this will remain up in there, so if you see it come out on one side but not the other, double check that this is either A, in there, or B, you dropped it and you've accounted for it. Make sure this goes back in there where it belongs. Then right underneath this cup, or this rubber cup, will be a steel cup. The steel cup is what pivots around this guy, while this one stays fixed inside that top cup. And this topmost cup pivots around the metal of the car. So you can picture it, this pivots on it above that. This sticks on the bottom of that. So if you can picture my rubber part being stuck up in there, this next steel bell pivots some inside of this. Now, here's where we get to the actual strut. So I'll set my couple parts aside, And here is our strut, or shock, whatever you'd like to call it. First thing left on this guy will just be a dust boot. Not all cars have this, but all of them should. If yours does not, try to get one. They're relatively universal. You can see this one's about, well, from the bottom to the bottom, it's about 8-9 inches. That's plenty. And then here is your strut. You're pretty much all done removing this. Now these struts are hard to come by. This year, the summer of 2020, production for these ended in America. You can still buy these over in Europe. Places like Bird and Power sell them, but they're rather expensive. And when you consider that you have to ship them to America on top of that, they're very expensive, or I should say they become very expensive. And as of right now, there are no drop-in alternatives. If that changes and I get a hold on one, I will say so. And if any availability changes on these, you'll see me write it in the description. Any single one of these that that is still available, I will have a direct link to it in the description for you. Because I'm in the process of working with a manufacturer to start reproducing these. But I have no idea when it's going to start happening. They haven't been able to write back to me and take the time to work some things out on their end. But that's kind of what we're dealing with. Yeah, I will have a video sometime on the Conies. I do have a 84 turbo car, and that has red conies in all four corners. It still has them, believe it or not. But before we go, I'll just reassemble this. So we got our new strut. This is the old one, but let's pretend it's new. Put our dust boot on. It will go down all the way. Next, we put our little steel bell cup. Put that down. Next, we take our bottom rubber cup, set that on our steel one, and make sure it can pivot some. You can grease these if you want to. It's not necessary, but it might be a good idea. It keeps them from vulcanizing. You know, I could foresee these being all kind of tricky up in there if these haven't been touched in the last 40 years. And then, assuming this is where the shell of the car would now be in the sandwich of parts. The car would now be here, and then over the car, we put on this bigger rubber boot, the upper one. We set on our steel cup, our upper steel cup, and last we put on our nut. The people, a lot of people in this world say, "Oh, you got to put Loctite on it. You know, Loctite everything. Loctite the universe." Well, you're just gonna make things harder for yourself, so try not to. I mean, you know, you're gonna have to put a torch in there just to remove the Loctite, and then even when it's hot, it still sticks. So if you do anything to these, anti-seize is what you want to do. Keeps the stuff from getting locked, because these are not too fun to deal with. You can see this one, I got lucky. This shock has an Allen head on the top of it, so I could actually stick an Allen in there while working a wrench inside this guy. And you can imagine with these cups, it's really hard to fit a normal wrench in here. I mean, that just ain't going to happen, so you have to fit the big end or a socket with an impactor and just with the impact, hope this breaks free without spinning the chrome tube. But what I had to do with this one is I did the impact method. I put an impact gun on the end of this. It was able to come out a couple turns and allowed me to raise to get some space between my cup and my car. And when I do that, what I did was I pushed down on the cup and it made my nut stick out just like this. And with it being up higher, I could then grab my wrench, pretty much any wrench, and work this back and forth by hand with an Allen in that slot. I was able to make good ground. Some of these won't have an Allen on the top. Instead, they'll have it'll be a steel post. It'll look kind of like the tip of my finger, where it's flat on two sides but rounded on the other two. And it's made to fit a wrench, an open end wrench into it. But it's real small. It'll be like a 10 millimeter, maybe an 11, maybe 12. But you put an open end wrench in there, and that becomes very hard to do once your nut gets here, because you can obviously no longer reach your wrench spot. So just work this up and down with like PB Blaster. Get the threads wet with oil. Just work it up and down, because once you fight all the rust off, you shouldn't have any issues getting this off. Worst case scenario is you strip the threads halfway down the top of the strut, and then your nut is trapped in there forever. That is that will be a bad day, because pretty much your only solution then is to start cutting crap. Whether you start cutting your nut, cutting the stud, or cutting the chrome tube underneath this dust boot. That's the only way any of that's going to come out. But I think I covered everything today. If you have any questions, as always, you're always free to write me up. I do have my email linked to my channel, and if you ever have questions, you can send me photos through that, and I do respond to them rather quickly. So I'll let you guys go. Have a good day, and see you later.